third and hopefully final part of the Ableton bit of our MD course. Today we're going to learn about running Ableton in an actual live worship set. So I've got a few things we want to run through. Now, as you can see, this is the KXC Master Ableton session again, and I've dragged up a couple of songs from my library. So we're going to start this set with Fighting Back in G, and then King of My Heart in G. Let's say I just want to go straight in and press play. Now, as you can tell, nothing happens. In fact, I'll press spacebar just to stop it. All these things are flashing. Not really sure why that is, but if I press play, nothing happens. And we've got this error message at the bottom. The audio engine is off. And this is because we've not done some of the basic setup stuff that we've been talking about. So let's just go through that quickly, making sure everything's good to go. So I go into Preferences and Audio, and I haven't selected an audio output. So I'm going to select my computer speakers. If you were at church, you'd probably have an audio interface connected, so you'd need to select that. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to select the built-in output of my laptop, just so we can hear what's going on. And I've got channels 1 and 2, the only two channels selected, as both a mono and a stereo option. So I can, okay, now we've got some stuff going, so I'm going to stop that. Okay, now what else do we need to make sure? Well, do you remember we need to make sure stuff's assigned correctly? So at the moment my clicking cues are assigned to 3 and 4, but I'm just want to play it out of my computer speakers. So this is I'm going to put this in 1. And I'm going to put this in 2, so at least there's some separation side to side. And then everything else, all the other tracks, as you can see, they're going to the master channel. And then here, in the master channel, I select which channel the master goes to. So I'm going to say that I want that to be 1 and 2. Okay, so anything that says master on it, so for example BV4, it says it's going to the master channel, and the master channel in turn goes to output 1 and 2. That's great. And finally, demonstrate this. So if I launch King of My Heart, again, you'll hear that nothing's playing. But oh, I haven't actually selected the inbuilt metronome, system metronome, so I could select that here. And yet still I hear no sound. And that is because the cue out, this thing is actually called a cue. Now this is a bit confusing because we call our metronome a click, right? And then when I refer to cues, I mean the voice saying intro 1, 2, 3, 4. But Ableton calls the metronome cues. Okay, so you just have to remember that's a bit of a confusing thing. And the Ableton cue, the inbuilt metronome, is currently going to channel 3, which doesn't exist on my computer. I've either got 1, 2, or 1 and 2. So I'm going to select that to 1. And now you'll be able to hear that is coming out the system. This little headphone thing here is the volume for that. So if I turn this right down, now you can't hear it. And if I turn this right up, you'll be able to hear it pretty well. And I usually have this set at about 3 o'clock, somewhere like that, 75%. Great. So if I launch my first track, brilliant. And so that's playing. So, before we launch into the actual set, before you start, you just want to select what things you want to be playing on the tracks. Now, we've tried to categorize our tracks into some helpful or kind of like sub-instruments. And lead guitar, these last 3 are worth particularly paying attention to. If you have a lead guitarist in your band, you might want to mute this channel, because otherwise the lead guitar on the tracks will be playing, and you might not want that because they might be doing the same job. So maybe you deselect this channel, the yellow light goes away. However, sometimes you might have a band and there's no bass player, for example, or there's no piano player, or the piano player is there but they don't know how to play the lead piano part. Maybe you want to have these things, maybe you want to have the bass and you want to have the piano. This is how you can kind of choose whether to have these things or not. But maybe you want the lead guitars for all the tracks except for this particular track. You could always just delete this little audio file here. Okay, remember you're not kind of permanently deleting this, because I can edit undo and bring it back, or of course I can I've copied this from my tracks library. I've found this down here, so this is only temporary, right? I can just delete that in my active set, and I can come down and put it back in by selecting this Fighting Back, copying it, and then coming up here and pasting it, and it's back there. Okay, so we're ready to go. So in the actual set of worship, either yourself as the MD or someone else is going to be firing Ableton. It doesn't have to be the MD, it could be the keys player, for example, or anyone, or the drummer often will fire Ableton. But it's useful for you to know how this works anyway. So let's just, for argument's sake, say that it's you now who's actually firing and using Ableton in this set of worship. Okay, how do I launch a track? This is really important. You have to launch a track by pressing this little play button by each track, okay? If you try and use the spacebar, this can bring you into all sorts of problems, okay? If you press spacebar, for some reason, all of these individual little tracks, these little scenes, don't launch simultaneously. What I would say, for safety's sake, never launch a scene, which is one of these rows, by using the spacebar. Instead, launch it by pressing the play button, okay, here. So it means you need to use your mouse and click it. And then if this was going, and I want to launch King of My Heart afterwards, you notice I pressed it, and then the new tempo for King of My Heart continues. This brings me to a really important point in Ableton, which is, in Ableton, it doesn't matter when exactly you press the play button, as long as it is in the bar before you want it to launch. So this thing is counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. A bit faster than that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And as long as I press play in that 1, 2, 3, 4 before the start of the next bar, then at the start of the next bar, the next thing will be launched. So if Fighting Back is, in fact, if King of My Heart is playing, so this is going 1, 2, 3, 4. If I want to launch Fighting Back, I just have to make sure I press this play button any time in the bar before I want it to start. So here we go, I'm going to press it now. And then did you notice at the start of the next bar, it launched? So it's a really helpful thing in Ableton. You don't need to be exact in when you press it, as long as you press the play button at some point in the previous bar. It will snap to the next bar. Okay, if you want to stop playback for any reason, say something's gone wrong, or you just don't want the click to be playing anymore. So this click is playing, and I just want to stop it. You can then press the space bar to stop it. Okay, if Fighting Back is running, so the tracks will be running. Say you want to stop the tracks, but you want to keep the click going, then this little stop button here is your friend. This will keep the click going, but it will stop the audio. So you can hear audio playing now, and I'm going to press this stop button, and you'll notice the music will stop, but the metronome will carry on. And did you notice that it stopped the music not as soon as I pressed that stop button? I pressed that stop button in the previous bar, and as soon as we reached beat 1 of the next bar, that is the point at which it stopped the music. So remember, like I just explained in Ableton, instructions that we give it to stop or start take place at the start of the next bar. Okay, and I'm going to stop this by pressing the space bar. Continuing the clip, we've talked about tapping tempo and nudging the tempo. Let's say we're in King of My Heart, and the worship leader communicates to me that they want this song to be a bit quicker than it currently is. Now, we've got a couple of options to do this. Either I can stop this and tap in the new tempo, and there's this tap feature up here, so maybe they're strumming along to it and I can follow their rhythm. So maybe they're strumming and I'm going to tap along with that rhythm, and Ableton, once I've done 4 clicks, because we're in 4/4, once I've done 4 clicks at that tempo, it will then start the click again. So dun 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 dun. So did you notice I clicked on that tap button 4 times, and after on what would have been the 5th tap, it started this new tempo. So this is useful for immediately starting a new click. The problem with this is that it requires you to be incredibly accurate on the tap button and clicking on that tap button, which is fine. It can sometimes be rather difficult to get this completely correct. So what I would suggest instead of tapping in a new tempo, two things. Either if you tap in a new tempo, what I would say is reduce the click volume to 0. So tap it in, tap, 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 and then this will be going, and you can kind of make the metronome volume quite quiet, and it's almost like you can make it so quiet that only you can hear it, and then that will kind of indicate whether you've kind of got it right. And if you're confident, then you can whack up the volume, or you can kind of like merge it in gradually so it's not so stark, because there's quite distracting if you suddenly start to click that actually is at the wrong tempo. The other way you can do this is by King of My Heart already playing, and remember the worship leader wanted it to be a bit faster, and so what you can actually do here is just click on the tempo itself and type in a new tempo. So I'm going to say 152, and when I press enter the new tempo will start, but only at the start of the next bar. Remember, Ableton starts any instructions at the start of the next bar, so I'm going to press enter, I'm going to press it now, and then that new tempo started at the start of the next bar. And that's a little bit faster. That's quite a good way. This is called nudging the tempo up, or maybe I want to go a bit faster than that, 153. And then we're now at 153, and hopefully that is the correct kind of tempo. Great. I would say that tempo nudging and tempo changing is something that requires a bit of practice, and you'll probably find that's quite challenging. So give it a go, but don't be discouraged if it doesn't go very well. There's something that I think requires a little bit of practice, because it's quite difficult to do that successfully on the fly without anyone kind of noticing that you've kind of butted in. Okay, what else are we going to talk about here? Troubleshooting. This is a real key one. In Ableton, lots of things unfortunately can go wrong. And one of them is that you start playing some music and it just feels like everything is out of time. The first thing to check with this is make sure that all of your individual clips, these individual audio files, have all been warped, okay? So, for example, you might have warped them incorrectly, and you'll need to refer back to the very first video to really delve deeper into how to warp things correctly. If you've not warped them correctly when you import them, then you're going to be in all sorts of bother. But another reason why this could have gone wrong is perhaps you've increased the tempo of this. So I'm going to remember I'm coming into fighting back, and I'm going to increase the tempo here to 90 BPM. But for argument's sake, let's say that the cues channel is not got warped selected. So this is going to be unwarped. And let's just listen to what happens. Intro 2, 3, 4. Now I hope you noticed there that the cues were out of time with the click, and that's because the cues were unwarped. So we need to make sure that all of them are warped. So yes, if you ever get timing issues, it's probably to do with warping. Either the audio tracks have not been warped correctly at first, in which case you'd need to go back to my instructional video number 1, or you might just need to check that all of them are warped. Spacebar, we've already talked about that, but trying to launch a scene by pressing the spacebar is prone to error. Please use the play button. No sound, that would be to do with either your master volume is up, which is this thing, is down, sorry, and there's no volume, so you need to make sure that's at 0. And if you hold down Alt and double click, or single click, that will always snap it back to 0. Also, no sound is because maybe you've not put the audio device in correctly here. No files. Sometimes you'll see an error message that says the files are missing, and that is because, unfortunately, in Ableton, if you bring in a file and then rename that file in your computer, Ableton will go looking for that file but won't be able to find it. So do you remember we said once you drag a file in, make sure you do this collect all and save, and that means that Ableton saves the file within this particular folder, okay? That is something that has happened to me many times, where I've dragged a file in, and then for some reason I've moved the file, say it was on my desktop, and I've put it into a more sensible folder, and then Ableton goes to the desktop looking for it, and it can no longer find it. And then you have no audio to play, and it can be quite alarming. Things playing in the wrong key is a classic, but do you remember that this scene here in the master channel is called Fighting Back, and it's in G, but the name of the scene, Fighting Back in G, actually doesn't bear any resemblance to the actual key of this piece. What it means is that you have to make sure that the individual audio files are correctly transposed. So I've selected this guitar audio track, and the transpose button is set to 3 semitones up, which is correct. We wanted that, and we wanted everything to be translated 3 up, but I might have forgotten to do that, and maybe it's at 0. I've now made that 0. If I launch this scene now, all the tracks will play. So the synths are in +3, the lead guitars are in -9, which is the same as +3. It's just +3 take away 12. These lead guitars are in +3, but this set of guitars are 0, so they will be dissonant, they will be in the wrong key. So you need to make sure everything is selected at the correct key. Finally, in this little troubleshooting section, a sound engineer may say to you, everything is coming in far too loud or far too quiet, but often they're saying it's far too loud. These little faders, as you can see, I've got them all selected at 12. Now, if I hold down everything, double click with the Alt key, now I've selected everything and set them all to 0, okay, which is, in other words, it doesn't mean 0 as in you can't hear it, it means the default point. Now, this will often be too loud for the sound desk. It means you're sending quite a high volume to the sound desk. So often the sound engineer will ask you, can you duck or can you reduce the volume? So I often want to set all of these at about 12, and if you select all of them, you can see they're all moving in sync. So I set them at -12. Finally, in this video, I just want to talk quickly about key mapping, which is a really helpful part of Ableton. You can come up to this little key button here, press it, and what this means is you can press a key, you can press a button, any button that you see on the screen. So, for example, I'm going to select the metronome button, and you can see there's already a little R there, and that means I've already mapped this to my R on the keyboard, to my computer keyboard. But let's say I wanted to do a different one, so say I want to do D. So I simply I press the metronome button here, and then I press D, and as you can see, it now says a little D here. If I come out of the key, so at the moment we're kind of like in key mapping mode, so press the key button again, which is up here, and we've exited that mode. Now, if I press that D button on my computer keyboard, if you keep your eyes on this metronome thing here, you'll see it toggles on and off, and that's me pressing D on my keyboard. This is useful because it means that I can use a key on my computer keyboard to perform one of the functions, rather than having to use my mouse to do it. So it's useful for metronome, toggling that on and off. I find it particularly useful I like being able to use my keyboard to start this scene. So, say I want to start fighting back. Well, I go into my key mapping mode, and you see here's this little play button, and this play button refers to whatever scene we're highlighted. So at the moment I've highlighted fighting back. This play button will play whatever scene is highlighted. So I'm going to select that and then press the F button. F is the button that I quite like to use to launch whatever scene is highlighted. Come out of the key mapping mode, and now if I've got fighting back selected and I press F, it will launch it. Now, it's worth just noting that the enter button does that very same job. So you don't need to map that. No, that all sounds a bit out of time, doesn't it? Now, why is that? We warped it and we re-warped it, and unfortunately it thinks that the default BPM that we want is 90. So this should be 84. That was the starting BPM. And now if we do this, it's all back in time again. Great. So you can use key mapping to do all sorts of things. The other one I find useful is to have some keys that go up and down. What have I got these as? Let's just check. So up and down, scene up, scene down. I've got it as comma and full stop. So if I press the comma and full stop, I can navigate up and down without moving my mouse, which is really useful. So say I want to navigate down to, I don't know, God of Freedom, and then press enter. It will immediately launch God of Freedom. And that's key mapping. Guys, that's the end of our little Ableton kind of running the tracks within the set video. I'm sure there may be another couple of things that I've missed off, so if there are, I will create a final catch-all tutorial video. But thank you for listening to this, and please do ask me any questions that you have. Thanks, bye.